Pornography turns us from being full, complete people into being sexual objects. It is dehumanizing. Pornography enslaves us, desensitizes us, destroys relationships. And pornography is idolatry. It tries to take the place of God in our lives, and it can't carry the weight and the freight of a human life. Well, when I look back, I see that all my life, the enemy was taking some of the circumstances of life as it happens to a person and twisting it so that I actually got some lies implanted deep in me. It's like my operating system was corrupted. I found that there were some falsehoods operating very strongly that made me ripe for running to pornography as a substitute for God. In the last analysis, I found that as I'm the youngest of 6 kids, one of the earliest memories I have is of competing for attention with my siblings. Sometimes Mother would go and get a dozen donuts. She had 5 boys in the house. Sister was off at college. And so 5 boys and a dozen donuts, that's not going to last very long. So it was 1 donut today and another one tomorrow in the morning. You can have that. Okay. Well, sometimes that dopamine rush, that sugar high, I would sneak into the kitchen, and you wouldn't think this was possible with 4 siblings and 2 adults in the house, but I was only 4. Everybody else was way bigger. I'd slip into the kitchen and pilfer a donut. And the cry would, of course, go up the next time somebody opened the donut box. Hey, who took an extra donut? But the others were all the usual suspects. I was the unusual suspect. And Mother would look at me and say, Joseph, did you take that donut? No, Mother. And even at a tender age, unfortunately, I was able to look Mother in the eyes and lie to her. None of my siblings could do that. But I was able to. And as I say, they were all much more likely suspects than the 4-year-old. So I was usually exonerated, and the others were subjected to court-martials and things like that. Giving in to the craving. Later on in life, I realized I was already, those skids were already greased. I was already cocked and primed for that kind of giving in to that kind of temptation. I had other things happen to me that reinforced that sort of thing on a more personal level. My parents' generation, they were not touchy-feely. Just didn't. Not demonstrative. There's no rumpling your hair. There's no giving you a hug. There's no little caress. There was no touching. I was touched in the line of duty. Mama got to put a Band-Aid on me. Or, of course, she's always willing to stop right in the middle of the mall and pull your glasses off and rub something off your face. While you wait for the earth to open up and swallow you. But I got the conviction that nobody wanted to touch my body. Nobody wanted to see my body. And of course, there's enough give and take and roughhousing in a family of 6 kids that, the bathroom door opens. Nobody wants to see that, which is a casual thing. I'm saying that this got twisted to make lies. So by the time I was pre-adolescent, I am convinced that I'm not desirable. Nobody wants to see me. Nobody wants to touch me. fast forward to age 13 or so. I was in the 8th grade. I was spending the summer in Houston with my cousins. I was staying with my sister, who's like 12, 14 years older than me, and her husband and their 3 kids. And so my cousins and I are playing around, and my cousins and I found a stack of Playboy magazines. These medical students who lived next door to my sister had put out on the curb for the trash man. And, they were moving out, and so they were cleaning house, and they put all these things out there without a thought. And my cousins and I found them. Well, this is 1968, and these are Playboy magazines. And so we scurried off behind my cousin's garage, and we didn't read them for the articles, but we went through those and divvied them up. And I remember that I hid them under some shingles behind the garage. So the first rainstorm, I was delivered from that temptation. But the start down that path was starting with Playboy. That was the gateway drug. And it wasn't much of a big deal. And it's certainly nothing compared to the jolts that I got later on from real pornography. But that was the start. And then years went by, and in the 60s and the early 70s, a kid like me has no way to get a Playboy magazine. They're not sold to minors, and that's that. Unfortunately, I found my father's stash of dirty books. And these were something that, again, in the late 60s and early 70s, you couldn't find these anywhere. He went downtown to the sleazy bookstore, and they were under the counter at the sleazy bookstore. They weren't even out. And I found them where he had hidden them, and I read them, and I said, this is really bad writing, but it was still enough to keep my interest. And so that was a little side theme running along with all the rest of adolescence and all the rest of things. And so no big deal still yet. So I went to university. It's no big deal. I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in trying to get a date and going to the pub with my friends and doing all of the things that you do the first time you're off the leash at university and you're not in your parents' home. And so that kind of stayed dormant, that whole temptation routine and so on. And I didn't really have a problem with it. And then I found myself, after I left college, living on my own in Houston. And one day, as they say, the devil finds work for idle hands, and he also finds space to rent in idle brains. One day, I had this thought that I'm a legal adult. I could go see an X-rated film. I can go to an adult cinema and see what all the shouting is about. Well, the shouting wasn't much because they're really creepy and they're in a kind of not nice part of town. And the clientele is not anybody you want to be buds with. But seeing live action was so far above a fold out in Playboy that made an imprint. And that started tying the threads in my heart to that sort of attraction. And then, I occasionally went to see an adult film, but again, it's not convenient. You got to sit through the whole film just to get the juicy parts. You're in a creepy place with creepy people, and it's not convenient. So I leave that lifestyle and I became a Christian. I joined a ministry, started traveling full time, ministering on the road with a team, and married started a family, and these things were all in the background. No big deal. Every now and then, when occasionally we were apart or I was on my own for a few days, I would go to the newsstand, and now you could get things like Penthouse. There's a little bit step above or below, if you want, Playboy. And I could go to an arcade now where you feed in quarters and you can fast forward to get to the parts you want. But again, I don't have a lot of money because I'm a missionary, and I don't really have much motivation because, but it's still keeping that ugly root alive. Then there was the internet, and now I was in trouble. Now it was totally convenient. It was totally concealable. It was free, and it was nonstop. And I would say to myself, who are you? What are you doing? You're supposed to be working. You're a Christian. You're a missionary. You have people who are counting on you. They think you're at work here doing this. And I couldn't stop. That's another scary thing. When you say to yourself, that's it, I'm done. This is wrong. This is just wrong. I'm never doing this again. And sometimes within the hour, guess what? I'm doing this again. And that's scary. And it was erosion. I was being hollowed out like a cantaloupe. I was being undermined like that real estate in Florida with the sinkholes. Just all of a sudden one day, your whole house disappears. And this is where I found that those lies from my childhood really started to kick in, because no matter how cheesy it was, no matter how fake it was, no matter how banal it was to watch these things I was watching, there was still that moment when you could identify with what was going on enough to feel like you were attractive and dynamic and handsome. And this started creating tension in other places, because when you start bringing phantoms into your bedroom with you, it's really bad. Your expectations get warped. You lose track of what's good and what's bad. You lose track of what's normal and what's not normal. You lose track of how am I supposed to, I would lose track of how am I supposed to react to this? Because all I'm comparing it with right now is stuff I've looked at, not real life with a real person. And that's scary. And I didn't want to talk to my wife about it. I didn't want anybody to know. And unfortunately, I was really good at covering my tracks. Till the day I told my wife what was going on, she had no idea. She had no suspicion.
It was shocking, but in another sense, it wasn't shocking too, because you feel like there's something between you, and when you kind of say, okay, that's what this is then. And so yeah, there's a whole gamut of emotion. You're angry, you feel betrayed, you feel also, I know I felt in myself like, what's wrong with me? I'm not enough for you. I'm not desirable enough for you, that you need this.
I think sometimes that people who get caught are the luckier ones, because painful as it is, I prolonged my own agony by saying, I'm not going to tell Nance this. I'm not going to tell her because it would just upset her. I'll just stop on my own.
I could see his shame and his own feeling devastated by seeing how devastated I was. And I think that even with that, it was still so hard for him. It was so hard for him. I know that it was like, I'm sure people who deal with alcoholism, it's the same thing. You know, you regret it, you say, I'm going to change, I'm never going to do this again, and yet, so it happened again, and it happened again.
She says, I'll help you. We'll do whatever we need to do to get through this. And so we started out. Started by getting help. And I started by getting some accountability partners, plus my wife. And to put an immediate stop to this, we installed software on our computer. We only had one at the time that would not allow me to go to any sites, and furthermore would report on every site visited or attempted visited.
It was not a overnight healing for him at all. But at the same time, it was like he would ask me, will you forgive me? And I think in our years of marriage, one of the key things that we both had learned is that forgiveness is a choice. It's not an emotion. So I was angry and hurt. My emotions were nowhere there for forgiving him, not at all. But you mechanically decide to forgive. I say, yes, I forgive you. And then, of course, I would have to do it again and then again. So you do it by a choice. And then as you forgive, God brings the actual, He's the one who actually honors your obedience by giving you the emotion afterwards. So even though it was incredibly hard, and I forgave really out of obedience because He asked me and I knew I had to. Not that I had to completely trust that it was all done, because it wasn't. And then as we were even working through that, you know, as it was becoming apparent that it wasn't going to be, you're all done, you know, we started talking about how to be accountable. How could he be accountable to me? How could he put up things in place so that he wouldn't be tempted, or when he did feel tempted, I would be in the know, so that he would say, I'm going through a rough patch. Stand by me, help me, pray for me, encourage me. And that was what was really healing, because then I was able to, and not condemn him, but I was able to say, this is our struggle. It's not just his struggle, it's our struggle. We're going to struggle through this together.
I found it really, the hardest of all was to just keep going and never give up and never give in and never say, well, I'm just never going to get over this. I might as well just die. That's not an option. And I'm so grateful to be able to share this. I had a friend tell me, he said, you just have to get up one more time, then you fall down. As long as you get back up, you haven't lost. And as long as you're still alive, it's not too late. And as long as you're still alive, God can do anything. And I've had to really cling to that. Some days that was all I had to cling to. I clung to the promises that God would complete His good work in me. I clung to the promises that I was a new person. And I clung to the people that helped me through this. So it's been years now, and I mentor some men. I'm always open to mentoring anyone who needs help and prayers, and I find that my experience has enabled me to help others by knowing what's coming, by knowing what's happening, by having insight into being able to call up someone and saying, "You just slipped, didn't you?" I'm like, "What, dude? How'd you do that?" And it's because, unfortunately, I've been there. I did that too. So yeah, I saw it. So don't, and let me help you. And that's been a helpful thing.